along a second, that'd be fantastic. I'd like to mention that Julie Hitchcock must be wonderfully sleuth, because not only did she locate Mike Smith, 2 weeks ago I had a phone call as well, and she said, Charlie, I've heard about what you're planning to do, and I'd like to have you speak about it just a bit before I introduce the budget speaker. I'm a regional development officer with Montana Department of Commerce, and people ask, what does that mean? It's really a combination of economic development and recently now it's community development. And all this came about because of 8 months ago, I woke up one day and I thought, my gosh, I've got 700 employees and I've got to find for 3 projects in western Montana. The region I cover is along the Route 93 corridor and the counties on borders southwest and north. And so, well, gee, that shouldn't be a problem. Everybody's moving to this part of the state. And I thought, yeah, that's right. Of the 700 people that I would need to help with these businesses to locate, about 300 of them are would be located in beautiful downtown Knoxon. And then another 300 potential will be located about 10 to 12 miles south of Libby. And they're not exactly the types of names of cities or towns that roll off your tongue when you compare them to Los Angeles, Chicago, and so forth. The third project is out of Kalispell, so that one makes a little bit more sense. So I thought to myself, gee, this is something that's really important. We've got to look for a marriage of the Business Resource Division, of which I'm affiliated, and the Housing Division, which people such as Gus Byron, Bruce Bridgestone, and so forth are associated. So I was on the phone with Gus real quick, and he said, who do I need to talk to find out about housing and what we can do to make this happen? So after having probably put in 15, 20 phone calls and getting feedback from folks of who would be the individuals that could be influential, I got a call from the coordinator of Montana Economic Development Association, which I'm a member, and the comment was, well, gee, we could go ahead and develop a MIDA, which is Montana Economic Development Association Housing Work Group, and get the interested folks together and look at how we can resolve the issue, or at least address it and see what we can do to solve it. Normally, when these phone calls go out, or these listserv mails go out, we get 8 to 10 people on the work group. Last count, we have 35 members who have signed up to be part of the MIDA Housing Work Group. So the comment was, well, gee, I think we've come upon here, a rather obvious problem we have with housing in Montana. And I thought, yes, this is true. But the point I want to make here is that not having MIDA be the one that is the center or the focus for that, but act as a conduit because of the first teleconference call that we had with the membership. We had a number of folks providing thought, input, and so forth, and brainstorming what we were going to do to resolve the issue with housing. And one of the things I think was very interesting that a number of the folks in the room here were participating in that, and as the conversation went on, we found that there were many programs that are available that different entities were not aware of. And that was rather surprising, but it was the reality of the conversation. So making a long story short, as we continued through the teleconference call, it came to be apparent that we were looking at a clearinghouse similar to what some of you may know as WASAC. It's the Water, Wastewater, Solid Action Coordinating Team that has been in existence in the state for about 25 years. It's a combination of 6 different regional, state, and federal organizations that work with infrastructure problems and get new sewer systems in, new water systems in for different cities and towns in the state. So with that, I thought, well, let's see how we can go through a parallel. And out of that first teleconference call was a decision made that we would be turning to Montana Homeownership Network as being the clearinghouse to be able to raise these issues, to act as the pass-through, the place where we can focus on and execute the steps that we need to take to solve the housing issues. So we had our first meeting, and we're going to be having a follow-up one now, next Monday. And there are people here, because I'm not asking for people not to come in. It's all inclusionary. If you feel you can contribute and be an active member of the housing work group that will, let's say, matriculate to the Montana Homeownership Network, please get in touch with me after the session here, and I'll be glad to give you the information that's necessary to get you signed up and go forward with that. So I think it's something that really does talk to how this has come together. It's a symbiotic relationship, and I do have a selfish mode on this. If I have to put 700 employees, 3 projects, I have to be able to say we have housing for them. And that's really key to making this success as we go forward. So I look now as we talk to going into the speaker for luncheon, and I've had a chance to chat with him a little bit. And one thing that we talked about last night, and I'll share with you, that I think is very important, because is it a housing issue, and don't talk with more than I will, or is it an income issue? Well, one of the things that I have found in the research going through to what we can do about workforce, so we can have available people to work with this particular business is nationally, 54% of the students who will be on high school go to 2-year programs. 46% go to 4-year programs. That's the national average. In Montana, 16% go on to 2-year programs, 84% go on to 4 years. So when people are asking, we're losing our students, they're going away, I think we have to look at what are we doing to keep students here that will become the base that our employers are needing for the workforce, that the housing then can be responding to, because they'll have incomes that can afford what we want for them to live and to stay here. So using that as a start here, I think I'll segue into the introduction of our luncheon speaker. He's a gentleman who has had 3 careers as such, either concurrently or consecutively over 40 years, initially as an attorney, a banker, and as a general business executive who I feel will be able to share with you a lot of his experiences to help talk further to what we need to do to resolve these issues. He currently lives just east of Livingston, has been there for 10 years, and in his professional career he has served on 3 national boards involved with community development. Most recently, he was appointed by Congress to the Millennial Housing Commission, and that was in the year 2000. And he served on a number of profit and not-for-profit boards. And at this point is chairman of the Preservation of Affordable Housing. It's a Boston, Massachusetts-based nonprofit entity that works on the acquisition, restructuring, and ownership of federally assisted affordable renting houses. And while in Montana, he serves on 3 boards in the region where he currently lives. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce David Stanley.
Several other people this morning gave my talk. I'm delighted to be here. You can tell from Charlie's introduction, that was the last 4% of what he was talking about. You can tell from Charlie's introduction that I was invited here because of things I used to do, positions of influence I formerly held. The only reason that I was invited here today is not that. The only current reason is that I live about 4 miles upstream from Burton, who is the director of the River Center. And it's really better to be upstream. Downstream is better. But I am here, and so I'm going to talk about affordable housing generally, affordable home ownership, which many of you in the audience know a great deal more about than I do, and affordable rental housing, in which I've been involved for many years. I'm not planning to talk about the many wonderful, valuable things that the nonprofit area carries on. with or without government support. You've heard about that this morning, and you'll hear about it again this afternoon. Others today have expressed a lot of optimism. This is not going to be an optimistic talk. That's the way it is. I'm planning to tell you that while nationally and in Montana, homeownership is around the highest it has ever been, the state of affordability and the outlook is, to paraphrase the Baker-Hamilton Commission, dire and deteriorating. I think you got that this morning from George. Dire and deteriorating. And at least, to the extent that we have what we have represents a housing problem, as Charlie indicated, I might say, it calls for very substantial, major change in governmental behavior at all levels, local, state, regional, national in particular. But it may very well be, and I'm inclined to believe, that what we have in Montana is an incomes problem, or an education problem, or a workforce readiness problem. In both of which cases, government matters a lot too. Then I'm going to offer a few thoughts on what to do in respect of both rental housing and homeownership. Probably express some unpopular views to some of the people I've heard so far today. Try to handle a few questions and stop talking. Lots of things I'll say, many of you will know. A number of them you've already heard today. May even heard them today. That's the way things go in symposia like these. Okay. First, of course, there's a definition of affordability, a federal definition. Housing that costs the household 30% or less of household income is affordable. Households paying more than 30% are considered burdened by housing costs. Moderately burdened from 30% to 50%, severely burdened when they're over 50%. Last I knew, and I think my numbers are probably older than George would have me have my numbers be, but last I knew there were about 28 million American households that were burdened. 28 out of maybe 104, 105. That's a full quarter of the households in America that pay more than 30% of their income for housing, for shelter. And there were about 11 million, this number is probably low, over 10% of the nation, 11 million households, that were severely burdened, paying over 50% of their household income for shelter. George does tell us that the numbers that are as old as the ones I can find. I wait for George's research every year. The numbers that are as old as the ones I can find are very conservative, very favorable to the housing situation. I don't have numbers for Montana, and I learned this morning that there are no numbers for Montana. But because the median household income in Montana, $35,000, that's not the median family income, but the median household income, which is the factor used for measuring housing affordability. The median household income in Montana of $35,000 is only 75% of the national median household income, a little over $46,000. Because of this disparity and the fact that building materials are priced nationally, generally speaking, I think we might pay a little less for dimension lumber here than we pay in Chicago, but Home Depot, for the rest of what's in Home Depot is priced in Montana the way it's priced in Chicago, and that's true for Lowe's and what have you. Because there is national pricing and the median household income is so low, I suspect, I'm almost certain, that the percentages of burden in Montana are substantially higher than the percentages nationally. In the nation, about 69% of households live in homes they own. This is about the homeownership rate in Montana. Montana is about 70. 30 or 31% live in rental housing, or at least in places they don't own. The affordability of homeownership is a much more visible problem here in Montana than is the availability of affordable rental housing. But both are big, important issues in the nation and in Montana. Now, to earn the median household income, a little over $35,000 in Montana, That makes you definitionally middle class. Now, the top of Montana is what we would think of as middle class nationally. But at $35,000, the median income, half the households earn at that level or higher, half earn less. You're middle class. Now, in the Chicago metropolitan area, with a median household income of nearly $80,000, metropolitan Chicago, the middle-class Montana family at the median would meet the HUD standard to be considered very low income, less than 50% of area median household. Now, if that Montana household had a credit rating in the low and mid 600s, I think that would be not uncommon at a median household income in Montana, and a normal, unpleasant mix of debt service payments, the car, the truck, the cell phone, child support, whatever. Then if that family also had 10 or 15% of their down payment, they could qualify for about $110,000 of a mortgage in the normal course. And they could be really house poor in a $125,000 house. Really house poor. Now, that's what the Montana household income would buy, maybe a little more, but still house poor in what I think we would probably think of now as a poor house. The median sale price of a home in Montana in 2005 was a little over $150,000. Last year, it was a little over $300,000 in Whitefish, the median price in Whitefish, a little over $300,000, and it was $178 in Billings. There are other numbers you can get, but it's pretty clear there is a substantial gap. Thousands, tens of thousands maybe, more in income are required for the median income family to afford the median house. Now, that's not impossible, but generally speaking, I would view that the median household income earners, commonly two earners, in Montana are not particularly upwardly mobile. So maybe they're going to make $10,000 or $15,000 more than they make now. It's not a bet I make. Just anecdotally, there were 372 houses for sale in Missoula County earlier this month at an average asking price of $308,000. Not a very good neighborhood in Missoula County. 1,400 were for sale in Gallup County. Now we're getting at an average price of average asking price of $612,000. That's a good neighborhood. Flathead is an even better neighborhood, even less affordable. These are averages. They are not medians. Multi-million-dollar properties, like whoever. Multi-million-dollar properties skew the average, and Gallup and Flathead are extremely high-cost areas anyway. But there's a clear disconnect between the median house price and median income. The median house is simply not affordable at the median income or anywhere near it in Montana. And for the household at 75% of the median, that's about $26,250 a year, the case is much, much worse. So, what do we do? In fact, to deal with this delta, do we lower housing prices, housing values, or do we raise incomes? Raising incomes, which is not the subject of the day, there may well be another Wheeler Center forum on raising incomes. It's not the subject of the day, and it is not a subject upon which I have any competency whatsoever. It requires fundamental systemic change, likely to take generations, if likely to happen at all. Much too complex for today, not on the table. Prices for owned housing are set in the marketplace, essentially in a slow-paced auction. They are affected by interest rates and by supply and demand. But affordability tends to remain constant, I believe, with the benefit of lower interest rates and the benefit of higher demand going mostly to the seller. Except for newly built housing, where a reduction in government regulation can dramatically bring down costs. Whether we end up with the kind of community you want when we reduce that regulation is another matter. But it can dramatically bring down costs and prices. I don't see much that government can do in a very large way that helps bring down prices. First time, bring down costs to the buyer. First time home buyer and some other mortgage subsidy programs, particularly coming out of home, do help affordability. The benefit does stay with the buyer. Down payment assistance, the benefit stays with the buyer. But mostly, there's not much to do. I know that Jeff Rupp will this afternoon talk about set-asides or inclusionary zoning. In some very strong, high median income markets and scarce land markets, I think they work just fine. Montgomery County, Maryland, Fairfax County, Virginia, Santa Barbara, probably Whitefish. People just must live there so that the subsidy, which is provided by either the developer, the landowner, or the buyer of the market rate home, the subsidy is manageable. Mostly, it's a cost transfer, and it's not going to help affordability much. I would not generally favor such a plan for Montana, most Montana communities. I think Jeff Rupp will come to a different conclusion, and he knows more than I do. Now, my bottom line with respect to affordable home ownership is that there is simply a mismatch between housing costs and household incomes in Montana and in the nation, and that the better course is to try to raise incomes, including through redistribution, the tax structure in the nation, but I don't know that anybody wants to hear that from me, rather than try to reduce housing prices. We need to remember that here, 70% of households own their own homes. The remaining 30%, maybe half of them, for whatever reason one would make this judgment, shouldn't. And the likelihood of a successful program to reduce the price of homes to achieve affordability is, in my view, very low. It's kind of like expecting Exxon to build another refinery because gas prices are too high. Tell me why, as a homeowner, I want to pay for something that substantially reduces housing prices, and the reduction would have to be very substantial. I believe there would be no political support for a government program to further subsidize the cost of home ownership for Montana families near the median. People from Chicago, where the median household income is near $80,000, would probably tell us to move to an area with higher wages if we want to build housing. You might say that. Okay? But when we consider the circumstances of families with incomes that are well below the median, and 50% of Montana median, $17,500, is not defined by HUD as very low income, or 35% of median, $12,250, extremely low income. There are federal programs that address those issues. There is a template. There is a template for renters, but it is grossly inadequate. There are about 13 million, the size of the problem. There are about 13 million very low and extremely low income households in the nation that own homes. Almost all, the extremely low, are severely burdened and pay more than 50%. I think the number I last saw was 58. I think we probably find it's in the low 60s now. Almost all the very low income are at least burdened. And the quality of the housing is generally pretty poor. These people have, the quality of the housing is poor, and these people, generally speaking, have no subsidy. They've made a choice to be homeowners. They don't have much money left over when they die. This is the people with the $500 a month that George was talking about earlier today. 13 million as homeowners. There are 8 million or so, maybe 9 or 10, is what's been happening in the economy in the last couple of years, 8 million or so extremely low income renters, who on average spend around 60% of their household income for housing. And there are another 6 million or so, very low, that's the 50% of median household. On average, they are moderately burdened. Put these numbers together, we're getting pretty close to the 28 million I mentioned a little earlier. Federal programs, often operated through the states or regional or local entities, or with the support of nonprofits, provide housing assistance to about a little less than 5 million households. That's 5 million that are not severely burdened, but would be if we didn't have the federal subsidy. So you've got 6 and 8 and 13 who are either moderately or severely burdened. And then there are 5 who would be severely burdened if it weren't for the federal programs. The federal housing programs have been around since the New Deal. First one was public housing. There's not very much public housing in Montana. It's famous in New York and Philadelphia and Chicago, Los Angeles, but pure public housing. Now there are about 1.25 million units in existence around the nation. None have been built since 1995. There have been some one-for-one replacements, but generally speaking, the federal government stopped supporting the building of new public housing 12 years ago. Throughout the 60s and 70s, Section 236, which is 1% mortgages, was in place, supporting now about 470,000 units. Nothing new has been financed with 236 since 1973. A number of programs with Section 8 in their names for very low or extremely low income families. About a third are project-based Section 8 buildings. About 2/3 are voucher-based, are vouchers that are used for subsidizing rent. Nothing has been built there's about 2.7 million of Section 8 in the nation. They increase by 35,000 a year maybe. They don't keep up with population growth. They don't increase when the income disparity widens. Nothing built since 1983. Now, Section 515, rural housing direct loans, 1% loans, looking like 236, been around for about 50 years, still around, provides support for almost 500,000 units in rural America. Some of rural America is not so rural anymore. More and more, these Section 515 units need additional subsidy, as do the 236s. They don't work that well anymore. Community development block grants and the home program, both grants to the states and to some larger local entities, targeted, generally speaking, to low and very low income people. Home is an all housing program and very effective. About a third of CDBG goes to housing in the nation and in Montana and in the communities that get CDBG directly. It's a very well-used program by nonprofits. It makes a difference, and the money that comes through home is multiplied a lot. Big is the low-income housing tax credit since 1986. The only federal program that, other than rural housing, that supports the production of new housing units. There are about 1.6 million or 1.7 million units in existence. I believe it grows at the rate of about 130,000 a year. If the rents in tax credit units are flat rents, they have to be affordable to households at 60% or less of area median income. It is the only production program with government support. And it's a good program, but it's a long way from perfect. And some of the things that were wrong with it this morning. But in low-income areas, like, say, Park County, the rents that are affordable at 60% of area median are not rents that will support the cost of the project. In very high income areas, the rents that are affordable at 60% of area median are likely to be the market rents. But in the middle, it works pretty well. It does not, it's only rarely, is it that low-income housing tax credit projects without additional subsidy can reach below about 45 or 40% of area median household income. So down in the 35 and below. Generally speaking, it's Section 8. Kind of all it is. So what do we do? Well, in 1999 and 2000, when it appeared that we would have federal budget surpluses as far as the eye can see, a bipartisan group of members of the House and Senate thought that it might be time to do something about housing. They appointed, at the end of 2000, a commission. And typically, congressionally appointed commissions get respect from Congress. Presidentially appointed commissions almost never do. I, a loyal, lifelong Democrat, and a friend of David Obey, who is now the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, one of the appointers, was appointed to that commission. And we studied, and we reported to the Congress in early 2002, by which time, after the 2001 tax cuts, after the little recession that we had then, and after 9/11, it appeared that we would have budget deficits as far as the eye can see. We made a number of wonderful recommendations, and in the fiscal environment that we faced, they fell dead flat. The big money recommendation was for a new capital subsidy program, just lots of money, to support new construction of housing affordable to very and extremely low income families in mixed income environments. Very expensive, very needed, but 10 days of the cost of the war would give us a very good start. We called for a home ownership tax credit. That's essentially in income, in census tracts where housing simply can't be built, where it's grossly unaffordable, and that would be much of Montana, grossly unaffordable to 80% of median income below, give a credit to the builder for the cost that would otherwise be subsidized by a home mortgage, a mortgage that was out of home funds. We called for many more Section 8 vouchers, much greater growth in Section 8. We called for the devolution of much of the authority that is exercised by HUD to the states, and particularly the state housing finance agencies, and to regional authorities as well. We called for tools to support the preservation of existing affordable housing, for a major expansion of home funds, and for a lot more. Neither Congress nor the administration had any appetite at all. No hearings of any kind were ever held. 2 pieces of legislation have been introduced. Nothing has become law. I said earlier that the situation is dire and deteriorating. And I think it is. I think housing prices will not decline in any secular way for the foreseeable future. Incomes will not increase relative to housing costs in a near-term time frame. It's a generational thing. So the median house in Montana will continue to be unaffordable. The median income household gets worse as you go down the income assortment, until we return to a period where budget deficits are not the order of the day. There will be no important increase in federal support for low-income housing. I'm glad to see that the proposed tax on Fannie Mae, I don't know how many people know about that, but it's proposed to tax Fannie Mae about $500 billion a year. I like that. I bet Annabella did not. But it should be lost on no one that at least the first year of the housing tax on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac really, will be used to go to Katrina. So it has nothing to do with, for the first year at least, hasn't passed yet, but has nothing to do with housing in Montana or anywhere else except the Gulf Coast and Louisiana. Overall, I guess you've got the understanding that I'm not a particularly happy camper. I've talked long enough. I thank you for your attention. I think we're ready for questions and criticism and outrage. So what do you want to do?
It hasn't been mentioned today that there actually is a very large federal subsidy for home
Oh, you bet. $100 billion a year. Limited to the interest deduction on $1.1 million of home mortgages and all of the real estate taxes you can possibly pay. Costs about 3 times the entire HUD budget. That's what it costs the Treasury. Massive. There actually is a movement to limit the deductibility to mortgages of about $500,000. So in my case, I get the value of several housing choice vouchers from the federal treasury. Yeah, I mean, it's a scandal. But again, when I was on the commission, I was giving a talk for Paul Wellstone. So everybody remember Paul Wellstone? Most people do. And I started talking about the interest, the mortgage interest and tax deduction. And Wellstone got up and he said, David, even I am not going to take that one. So,
Are there things that you think state government could do at the state level?
I think so, but I think we're talking mostly legislation. Most of what the state does for housing is pass through federal funds or administer programs that are federally funded, that are federally permitted, like mortgage revenue bonds and the like. Okay. Now, my sense is that county government in most of Montana is not powerful enough to do much. I think the restrictions on what I think are general purpose counties. I mean, Missoula's got all the power in the world. Is Missoula and is the county and the city are they merged, or is the county is different? But the county in Missoula has a lot of authority, power, and capacity, as does Yellowstone County and maybe Flathead. I don't know. Many of the counties don't have a lot of authority. Probably the legislature ought to give them more to let them be more active in housing. You know, they can zone, kind of, you know, but that's about it. I think maybe Dick Murphy thinks he's got more power than I think he does. Dick Murphy doesn't think he's got a lot of power. The Park County Commissioner. Albie.
If the deficit someday disappears, the national deficit someday disappears, and with your experience in Congress, are there members of both houses who have enough interest in this subject so that if we had a decent surplus, something might start?
Maybe. I mean, the powerhouse for us is Vox. But he's powerhouse for us for any number of reasons. But he is, as chair of the Senate Finance Committee, that makes a lot of difference because that's where tax issues can be handled. John Tester actually is on the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, or Chris Dodd's committee. And one of these days he'll make a difference. I believe he sits back in the back of the room quietly most of the time. At least that's what he's supposed to do. Barney Frank is a big houser. He's an important person in housing. The fellow who ran the Dodd Committee, Sarbanes, was a major factor in housing when he retired from the Senate last year. There are a few people, but 70% of the people own their own houses. Okay? And so they're not even terribly interested in the affordability issue. They already got the house. They've got an income problem. So where's the caucus? But there's some. Senator Bond from Missouri.
I just question a lot. Eureka has asked, Flathead County has asked, should they create a public housing authority? And in hearing you when the last public units were built, what do you think? Is there still time? Are public housing authorities something to be created?
Oh yeah, I mean you can create a governmental corporation, a public housing authority, or name it whatever you want, but something that has corporate entity, a non-profit But, you know, but maybe it's a governmental. I'm not sure what all the kinds of corporations you can have in Montana are. And once you've got the entity, it can do various things. In the case of the Public Housing Authority, a number of them around the country issue bonds. And that can be tax exempt and all kinds of stuff. Some are very entrepreneurial. I think you were talking about that. It's your authority that became quite entrepreneurial, or is it? No, okay. Yeah. Even if they have bad statistics in Missouri.
But the money's gone that we used to get for development. That's why I asked like this.
Oh, you're not going to get a budget-based grant from HUD for housing authority, no. I mean, it would be a place, you have a housing authority. I think the Section 8 vouchers in Park County and the contract, the project-based stuff in Park County is run by Jeff Rupp's organization out of Gallup County. Is it not? Or is it? Sure. Yeah. So we don't have inside Park County any real connection to the federal housing programs. Jeff has that connection. Am I right? Am I right or am I right?
Definitely a connection, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, he makes the decisions. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. You said that it was going to be kind of a downer, and we found her not in that role, but in her new role of working with